Hello friend! Buckle up as I dissect 7 everyday objects, straight out of history, some dismissed as internet hoaxes. Others marked by a trail of real, physical casualties, but every single one triggered a sequence of events that defy logic. I have arranged them by their threat level, starting with a 21st century fraud and ending with a vessel for something truly demonic. Let's start. Case 1. The Tuna Oven Incident, October 11, 2012, California, Bumblebee Foods Factory. Jose Melena, a 62-year-old maintenance worker, steps inside a massive industrial pressure cooker to repair a broken chain. He is deep inside the 35-foot cylinder, hidden in the shadows. Outside, a coworker assumes the machine is empty. He closes the heavy steel door. The lock engages. The machine begins its sterilization cycle. First, it dumps nearly 12,000 pounds of canned tuna inside, blocking any exit. Then, the steam injection begins. The temperature inside the oven climbs rapidly to 270 degrees Fahrenheit, about 132 degrees Celsius. Jose is trapped in that pressurized, boiling darkness for 2 full hours. When firefighters finally open the hatch, they do not find Jose as he was. The heat was so intense that the synthetic fabric of his safety gear had melted, fusing permanently to his skin. He was processed along with the product to 70 degrees. But for our next case, the physics were different. The end arrived faster than the brain could even process the signal. Case 2. The Byford Dolphin Accident, November 5, 1983, 4 a.m., the North Sea. On the Byford Dolphin drilling rig, 4 divers are resting inside a decompression chamber. They are living in a highly pressurized environment to survive the deep ocean. Inside the chamber, the pressure is maintained at 9 atmospheres. Outside, on the deck, it is just 1 atmosphere. A routine procedure goes wrong. A clamp is released before the chamber door is fully sealed. Physics does not forgive mistakes. The pressure drops from 9 to 1 in a fraction of a second. This is not just an air leak. It is an explosive decompression. The air rushes out with such violence that the heavy diving bell is smashed against the infrastructure. But what happens to the human body is far worse. The nitrogen dissolved in the diver's blood does not have time to release slowly. Instead, it bubbles instantly. Their blood literally boils within their veins. Post-mortem examinations revealed that the fat in their arteries had precipitated, turning white and solid, like butter left in a fridge. The most horrific detail lies with diver Charles Hellevick. He was standing near the door, exposed to a crescent-shaped opening only 60 centimeters wide. The pressure differential forced his entire body through that small gap. The force was so extreme that investigators found parts of his anatomy intact, thrown nearly 10 meters away onto the rig's deck. Pressure can tear a man apart in a blink of an eye. But sometimes, the most painful destruction happens silently, at the cellular level. Case 3. The Living Corpse Hisashi Ouchi, September 30, 1999, Tokyo, Japan. Hisashi Ouchi, a 35-year-old technician, is pouring a bucket of uranium solution into a precipitation tank. It is a manual error. The mixture reaches critical mass. A flash of blue light floods the room. In that single moment, Ouchi's body absorbs 17 sieverts of radiation. For context, a fatal dose is considered to be 7 sieverts. He has just absorbed enough energy to destroy his DNA structure completely. He arrives at the hospital looking relatively normal. But inside, his body has already ceased to exist. Under a microscope, doctors see the truth. His chromosomes have been shattered like glass. His body has lost the ability to generate new cells. For 83 days, he is kept alive against his will as his body falls apart. His white blood cell count drops to 0 within the first week. Then, the skin begins to fail. The medical team records a chilling observation. When they attempt to remove the medical tape from his arm, the skin comes off with it. There is nothing holding his flesh together anymore. He eventually becomes a living anatomy chart, muscles exposed to the air, kept breathing by machines while his organs liquefy. Ouchi died from the invisible light, but our next victim faced a darkness so absolute, it became his tomb. Case 4. The Nutty Putty Cave Tragedy, November 24, 2009, Utah. The Nutty Putty Cave System. John Edward Jones, 26 years old, makes a fatal navigational error. He mistakes a tight, unmapped fissure for the main passage. He crawls headfirst into a section known as Bob's Push, but he slides into a dead end. The geometry of the trap is terrifying. The space is a mere 18 inches wide and 10 inches high. That is roughly the size of a small laptop screen. Gravity becomes his enemy. John slides down a 70-degree angle, effectively standing on his head. He is wedged so tightly that he cannot inhale fully. His ribcage pushes against the rock with every breath. For 28 hours, rescue teams try everything. They set up a pulley system, but the rock anchors fail, snapping the rope and dropping John back into the crevice. The physics of the human body cannot sustain an inverted position for this long. Fluid pools in his lungs and brain. His heart has to pump against gravity, harder and harder, until it simply stops. The final detail is the most haunting because his body could not be removed without breaking his legs or collapsing the tunnel. The decision was made to leave him there. Workers poured concrete into the cave entrance. John Edward Jones is still there today, preserved in the rock, forever upside down in the dark. Concrete sealed John's fate by accident, but in 1989, concrete was used to hide a crime of unimaginable cruelty. Case 5. The concrete girl Junko Furuta. On the cold evening of November 25, 1988, in Misato, Saitama, 17-year-old Junko Furuta was cycling home from her part-time job. She was moments away from the safety of her routine. But a teenage boy, known only as Boya, kicked her off her bike. Feigning kindness, he offered to help her get home. It was a calculated trap that began a nightmare lasting exactly 44 days. She was taken to a 2-story house in the Adaki district of Tokyo. What makes this location truly disturbing is that she was held on the 2nd floor, while the perpetrator's parents lived their daily lives just downstairs. They heard the noises, they felt the vibrations of violence. But fear kept them silent. For 1,056 hours, Junko's humanity was systematically erased. Early in her captivity, she was forced to call her parents. With a trembling voice, she lied, telling them she was safe at a friend's house. That phone call ended the police search and sealed her fate inside that room. The torture she endured defies the laws of biology. She was hung from the ceiling and used as a punching bag for hours. When her muscles failed, she was forced to crawl on the floor to use the bathroom. Deprived of water, her body began to shut down, forcing her to drink her own urine to survive the dehydration. The end came on January 4, 1989. In a cruel twist of irony, Junko was forced to play a game of mahjong with her captors. She won. Enraged by her victory, the boys inflicted the final punishment. They dropped heavy iron barbells onto her stomach and poured lighter fluid over her broken body, igniting it. After hours of suffering, her timeline finally stopped. The boys did not panic, they were methodical. They folded her small, broken body into a 55-gallon steel drum. They mixed wet concrete and poured it over her, filling every void, before rolling the heavy cylinder into a desolate tract of reclaimed land in Koto Ward. When police finally located the drum in March of 1989, workers had to use sledgehammers to crack the hardened casing. As the concrete fell away, it revealed the forensic truth of her suffering. Her body was compressed into a tight fetal position. The autopsy showed that her brain had physically atrophied, shrunk in size not from a blow to the head, but as a biological reaction to the extreme stress and starvation she had endured. But the most haunting detail was not biological, it was visual. The concrete had flowed around her face before hardening, creating a perfect death mask. When the cement was removed, her expression was still visible. One eye was wide open, staring forever into the dark gray mixture, frozen in a look of absolute terror. Case 6. The fallen astronaut Vladimir Komarov. On April 24, 1967, cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov was orbiting the Earth inside Soyuz 1, but this was not a triumph of Soviet engineering. It was a funeral procession in orbit. Before the launch, engineers had documented exactly 203 structural failures in the spacecraft. Komarov knew these numbers. He knew the ship was not ready. Yet, he boarded the capsule to save his backup pilot and close friend, Yuri Gagarin, from taking his place. As he began his re-entry into the atmosphere, the tragedy unfolded with mathematical precision. At an altitude of 7 kilometers, the main parachute refused to deploy. When Komarov activated the reserve chute, it became hopelessly tangled in the drag chute. Suddenly, the complex spacecraft became nothing more than a six-ton stone dropping from the heavens. Komarov plummeted toward the Russian steppes at terminal velocity, unaided by air resistance. He slammed into the ground at 144 kilometers per hour. The impact was so violent that the capsule was instantly flattened. To make matters worse, the retro rockets designed to fire before landing to soften the blow exploded upon impact, turning the wreckage into a blast furnace. The recovery team did not find a body, they found a crater. At his state funeral, Komarov requested an open casket so the officials could see what they had done. But inside the coffin, there was no recognizable human form. There was only a calcined, black irregular mass, measuring roughly 30 centimeters wide and 80 centimeters long. It looked more like a piece of burnt coal than a man. The only identifiable part of the national hero was a fragment of his heel bone. He had effectively fused with the machine that killed him. Komarov fell from the edge of space, but our final tragedy happened right here on Earth, in a place designed for joy, where the laws of physics ignore the innocence of a child. Case 7. The boy on the slide Caleb Schwab. On August 7, 2016, the Schlitterbahn water park in Kansas City was echoing with screams of delight. 10-year-old Caleb Schwab climbed the 264 steps to the top of Erect. At 168 feet tall, it was higher than the Niagara Falls. Caleb strapped himself into the front seat of the raft. Behind him sat two adult women. And this is where the tragedy began, not with a mechanical failure, but with simple weight distribution. Let me explain this so you can picture it. Imagine you are driving a car over a steep speed bump. If you go slowly, the tires stay on the road. But if you hit that bump at highway speeds, the car launches into the air. Now, apply that to this raft. Caleb, weighing only 73 pounds, was in the front. The back was weighed down by over 500 pounds of adult passengers. When the raft plummeted down the first drop, it reached 70 miles per hour, 112 kilometers per hour. As it hit the bottom and started shooting up the second hill, the physics turned deadly. Because the back was heavy and the front was light, the nose of the raft tipped upward. At that speed, the air rushing under the raft acted exactly like wind under a kite. For a split second, the raft stopped being a boat and became a glider. It didn't just go over the hill, it took off. Tragically, the designers had installed metal hoops and netting above the slide to keep people in. But they hadn't calculated for the raft flying up into them. Caleb's body, traveling at 70 miles per hour, collided directly with a metal support bar. The force resulted in immediate internal decapitation. The people waiting at the bottom saw the raft slide to a halt. The two women behind Caleb were screaming, their faces covered in a warm fluid. At first, witnesses thought it was pool water splashing from the ride. It wasn't until the raft stopped moving that the crowd realized the pristine white slide was streaked with a long, crimson trail. The ride was torn down, but the lesson remains: you cannot cheat physics, especially when the cost is a child's life. These 7 stories prove one uncomfortable truth: the human body is a miracle of biology, but it is fragile. Whether it is 9 atmospheres of pressure to 170 degrees of heat, or a simple mistake in weight distribution, we are always just one variable away from destruction. Thank you for exploring the dark side of reality with me today. If you want to see more files like this, check the video on your screen right now. I'll see you there. Bye.